Sally Penny. It's great to be with you today in conversation as part of our Limitless series, and welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I feel very honoured, given the high calibre of women that you have as part of Limitless, being interviewed and attending Limitless. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Pleasure. And I know you personally. I know your backstory is really quite incredible. And I just wanted to start with a question on what encouraged you to get into law?
Well, I've always had a sense of justice and fairness. I didn't come from a background of law at all, but I quite like the way the law can give you tools to correct what one might call injustices or wrongdoings. But if the truth be known, I suppose not role model as such, but I always used to read the Rumpole of the Bailey books, and Rumpole was a large white man, greying in hair, and I love the way he was advocating on behalf of people in court. And I thought, well, I could do that. I could be a real advocate. But really, I just saw the law as a tool to correcting things and representing and giving a voice, I suppose, to people who didn't have voices, or indeed companies. So yeah, that was a true reason, really. And also, I love being a barrister. I love being an advocate. I love the preparation. Those were the real reasons, really. And, 20 years later, I'm still in it. I don't know how that's happened.
Well, in it and hugely successful, I might add. It's interesting that when we talk to women as part of the Limitless series, quite a lot of their first steps into their career has come from some degree of passion in their early days.
Yes.
Now, I know you speak regularly on representation in law. You've spoken about the imbalance in gender. You've also spoken very eloquently about the fact that there's limited BAME representation in law. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I know you champion that.
When one looks at the profession as a whole, now at the entrance level, for solicitors, it's 52%. Entrants are, in fact, women or girls, whatever the term you want to use, but women in entrance. And for barristers, it's about 60%. So women are, girls we're doing really well in terms of gender and entrance in gender. But when you look at the senior leadership positions, actually, they are poor, both in gender and both in BAME. And so that is, in fact, not representative. We are 50% of the population. But actually, we're not represented in the same way in the senior leadership roles in law. So not equity partners, not in the judiciary on the bench, not in the highest courts. And whilst we are brilliantly lucky to have a president of the Supreme Court who's also been advocating the importance of gender diversity, and there are now 2 other women sitting in the Supreme Court out of 12 positions, there's a long way to go. And of course, there is no BAME representation in the Supreme Court. That's a different argument. And not enough, in my view, in the senior position. And the importance is just that we need people who look like us, who represent the societies that we're serving. And I've been championing, because actually, as a mother of 2 boys and a daughter, it's important, just for my sons as it is for my daughter, to look at senior leadership and say, yeah, I can aspire to that, or that's a long way to go. And so some of the things that I've been doing is not just about ensuring we've got sufficient amounts entering the legal profession, but actually remaining in the profession and then striving to get to some of those leadership positions. And when I set up Women in the Law UK, people say to me all the time, oh, why would you want to do that? Haven't you got enough to do? But I think if we don't have enough role models and visibility of people advocating, whether it's in schools, girls' schools as well as boys' schools, and the mixed schools, of course, then you never see it. And I don't think you can be something you don't see. Actually, if you don't see it, you can't really relate to it. And if you don't see people who are saying, well, actually, my journey was with children, or my journey was with, this is my background, you can't really relate to it. And too often I think that we don't have sufficient women sharing their stories when we talk specifically about gender. Actually, and to a large extent, maybe not BAME, we don't have sufficient numbers of BAME. And in the city, there are BAME lawyers who are partners, but not enough are equity partners or managing partners, nowhere near it. But if we don't actually see them and speak about it, the aspiration often goes by. And so I've been very keen on championing that, because I do believe that when you see it and you hear it, you can really aspire to it. And that's one of the things I love about Limitless. There are no limits. And I think the more women or you see, and the more champions of limitless aspirations there are, the more that we can all achieve, actually. And so I've been very keen to champion that gender and and also social mobility. If I can just be clear, I think in my profession, the Sutton report just came out, and once again it showed that the majority of people in the senior leadership professions, in the legal profession, were from fee-paying schools. Now, I don't have anything against that, great, but actually what's happening to the rest of the country, we need to be socially mobile so that we are representative, so we have sufficient people representing those who lack access to justice, and so that actually wherever you live, if you're a white working class boy, you can aspire to become a barrister, and there are barristers, and I think we need to work harder on gender, on ethnicity, and on social mobility, because crikey, I think the gap is widening even more. We need to reconfirm those.
It's interesting you touched on a few things there, and if I can just call one or two of them out, Sally, is describing the industry and how women are going into the profession but not moving into some of the very senior and pivotal roles is one thing, and how the Sutton report has highlighted that the industry is predominantly dominated by individuals who've gone to fee-paying schools. That does represent a challenge and a barrier. So clearly traditional industries want to attract the smartest talent.
Yes.
But is there bias still remaining across industries? Is it conscious bias? What barriers did you come? Because you've been hugely successful. What barriers did you have to overcome in order to achieve what you have?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a conscious bias, if I'm honest. I think it's wholly unconscious. And I think often we recruit, or people recruit, firms, chambers recruit, in kind of people that they can get on with. It's natural to think, well, why am I likely to get on with that person than the other one? Yes. I would go for interviews where waiting just for the interview room, the other people waiting would be saying, oh, well, what does your father do? And my father is a doctor, black immigrant. He didn't have a father who believed in education, actually. He was a smart man, and that set him up on a journey, which was to walk to school every day, took early entrance exams, clever, produce a load of children. So when people ask me that, I'm thinking, I don't know what he's doing, probably some bad DIY somewhere. But there was a lot of that actually, you're a black woman, what makes you think you can enter the profession, let alone succeed? And I found that very hard because, and it did create for me that sort of barrier. You needed to be better at every stage. I couldn't afford to be mediocre or sort of blag it, which is a bit of a northern term, because there was too much to lose. There was always an extra level of sort of requirement, if you like. So I found that I just couldn't afford to be a bit lazy or do mediocre work or be less so. And I did find that a lot. And it wasn't overt. It was very subtle thing. To a large extent, I think obvious and conscious biases are sometimes easier to deal with because you know what you're dealing with. When it's sort of unconscious and very subtle, it's much more difficult to either call it out or find a way of dealing with it. And so, I did find, and that's partly why I'm so keen on speaking in schools, because I think quite often, in schools, the children just assume you can possibly be a barrister. Now, there are various reasons for that. There's no need for one to sort of have a hang up about it. By the time I finish in the school, crikey, they all want to come and work experience or what,
I'm not surprised because your enthusiasm is infectious.
Or whatever. Yeah, and a lot of the kind of things that I encountered, and I do have a can-do attitude, and a get-on-with-it attitude. But yeah, a lot of the early, turning up to court and being mistaken for a defendant when I was in an amazing coat. And there was nobody else there, and it was obvious that I was the barrister. But yeah, being told, wait there for your counsel, and that carries on, and I think there are ways to deal with things. I remember to a law firm recently where I was asked if I was there for cleaning, and I said, well, I know my coat's a bit scruffy, but no, I'm not. There's a room full of people waiting for me to conduct this negotiation. And so I think those things still exist. And there are ways of calling out. And I did say to the law firm, crikey, good job I'm not a client if that's the representation. Of course, they were then mortified and I said, you need to do something about it. But a lot of those things I encountered. and it's not acceptable, but they're there. You know, we've got a long history, I think, certainly with race, and I think with gender too. And I think we need to manage them in a way that needn't be confrontational all the time. I think humour is a good way to call things out, and proactiveness, I think, is a good way.
Indeed. So, you know, overt bias is there, and it can be called out. And what you were talking about sometimes is the occasions when it's unconscious. But I think the reality of it is, if it feels uncomfortable, then it probably was. And I recognise, and I'm pleased that you were generous in sharing that story, so thank you. Now, I know that you do an awful lot of charity work up in the north of the UK and also down here in London as well.
Yeah.
How does a super busy person like yourself juggle the complexities of being a barrister, which, as we know, is hugely time consuming, and the demands of supporting charity work?
Well, I'm asking myself that question too. I suppose I try and support the charities that, you know, really mean a lot to me personally, whether it's cancer charities because of one of my children, to actually the arts, the theatre. And so, if I'm honest, with great difficulty, because none of us have endless time. And also I'm always passionate about well-being, looking after ourselves. But for me, part of that actually is doing things that I enjoy, and fundraising. I do enjoy, and sitting on boards, you know, whether it's arts boards or mental health charity Rethink that I used to sit on. But I don't take on too much because I prefer to do things well than to have, you know, you can sit on 20 boards, couldn't you, really, and probably do them badly. I'm not at that stage, really. But what I think we can all do is to pay back, you know, a bit, however that is, whether it's mentoring, whether it's donating a bit, whether it's donating blood, because you're actually affecting people's lives. And so I just try and do the things that I think are important for my own well-being, and my family's well-being, because I think for any of us to be successful, we need balance. And balance for me comes from being in the courtroom and being out of the courtroom. I don't think I have enough time to do yoga, for example, but I find balance when I'm actually contributing to much more of a global picture, and a wider, beyond oneself, if that makes sense. I think that we're all bigger than our own persons and people, and so the fundraising kind of comes from that, and that's what I enjoy really in the little ways that I can do. And actually there's so many brilliant charities out there that I think that, you know, if I could do my little bit, then good. And so if I can help, ask me.
Sally, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's certainly your sense of justice comes through, and also just your generosity as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.